Hello everyone, my name is Shawn Hendriks, and in this video I'm going to share a tip and trick about how to animate the text in a text object inside of 3ds Max. This was actually one of the tips and tricks that I used in my 3ds Max tips and tricks class for Autodesk University 2014. Thought I'd share it as its own little encapsulated piece. So now when I talk about animating the text, I don't mean position, rotation, scale, or any of that stuff. What I'm talking about is the actual physical text so that it changes over time. Max text by default, that object doesn't track the text field. As you see here, that we've got the text field. This is not animatable. I can't change it to something else at any given point. It only looks at it once, and that's the last time it ever pays attention. So we're going to walk through how to change that. So the first thing we need to do is I'll just move the time slider just so you can see what kind of scene I've got set up. So what I've done is I've taken the text object and I've just position constrained it to these two objects so it stays in the middle, and I've done a look at constraint which looks at the camera so it always tracks it. And this just makes kind of a more interesting scene. And you can see these two boxes change distance. So what I want to do is I want to figure out how do I create a text object that actually acts as a dimension for two things. So the first thing we need to figure out is how do we get the distance between these two objects. So one simple answer to this without even having to go to script is to go to the helpers and use my personal favorite helper, which is the expose TM or expose transform. Click and just drop it in there, and I'm just going to add a box to its shape. This is for all intents and purposes basically a dummy or a point helper with some added functionality. What expose transform allows you to do is expose transform information for an object in relation to another object. So in this case we're going to say I'm going to use expose this node, and I'm going to expose the information in it in relation to not its parent, which is currently selected, because right now its parent would be the universe, the world of Max. We're going to expose it in relation to this right here. So immediately you see that the distance to reference is 137.001. If I change my point in time, you can see that that value changes each time. Okay, so now how do we get that information into the Max text? Well, we go and we pick on the text object, and I'm going to go and open up our curve editor, pull it over into our view. I'm just going to shrink it a little bit because we don't really need all that much of it. So we've got the text object selected. We're going to go to the text object's actual settings. And if I go here, I can pick on it here just so you can see it. So as I said, we can't animate Max text. There's not even a way to assign a controller to the text field. On the other hand, size, kerning, and leading, if we go and look at those, don't currently have a controller assigned to them, but they can. So I'm going to assign a controller to kerning, and that controller will be a float script. And the instant I assign a controller to kerning, now kerning will be checked every frame during a render or every frame of update during the time slider movement. So now what do we do with that? Well, right now you can see we've got an expression that just is 0, and that's because kerning was originally set to 0. No problem there, and that's kind of what we want. But we're going to add more information to it. So the first thing I need to do is a variable that I can use to reference to the object itself. So I'm just going to say the text will be the name of our variable. I'm going to create it. And I'm going to assign that to a specific node, and that node will be the text object itself. So we'll just scroll down a little bit, pick that, and say OK. So that's assigned. So now we just need to write the expression that does something. So remember, now that there's a controller, every single frame, Max is going to go run in here and check what this expression says. So we're going to say the text dot text. So the text is this object, and dot text is the value of this here. So we're saying the text dot text equals, and I'm going to throw some brackets up here just to contain what I'm about to say, $, and what we do need to do, because I didn't do it yet, is figure out what the name is for our helper here. So I'm just going to go over here and we're going to call it the helper. So our expose transform node is now called the helper, and I'll just jump back over here so we can see it. So once I've done that, I'll say so d helper dot distance. So that's the distance is the distance field on this. So you can see again if I go and pick on it, distance to reference. So d helper dot distance. And at this point I could just close the bracket, and because this value is actual number and the Max text field is expecting text or a string, so I can just simply here go as string and hit evaluate. And now you have 139.24, which is exactly the value that you see here. And again, if I just slide my time slider, you can see how it reevaluates itself every frame. Now, I can actually go a little further than this. Say I don't want the decimal places. Maybe I want it rounded off. Well, I could go into the bracket and say as integer. So it's going to take the value of dhelper.distance and say, give it to me as an integer. An integer has no decimal places. And I could say evaluate again. Now I just get the 141. I could also go and add units to this simply by, at the end of as string, adding a plus, which will add to the value. And in quotes, so it'll take the literal string of whatever's in quotes. And I could say, for instance, centimeters, and hit evaluate. And now it is updated. And again, this all tracks nice and smooth over time. Key here is once it's done all of this, it goes to the next line and says, oh, but value 0. So all we've done is we've gone into this kerning field with a script that every frame that script will go and run out, change the text box, come back and say, oh, I'm really just 0, and report that to kerning. So the kerning stays 0, but the text box keeps getting changed every frame. If you don't want the kerning to be something different, you can go in here and change the 0 to a 2 or a 3 or 4, whatever you want it to be. The key is, at the end of all of this, you have to have a line that has just a simple number, because kerning can't take all of this information. It doesn't know what to do with a bunch of string text, but it can take a final value at the end. So that's why you leave in that 0 or whatever number you want kerning to be. So that's just a quick look at animating the text box in text inside of 3ds Max. Hope you find it useful.